Welcome, friends. Today's story is titled, One Final Blind Date, The Lonely Billionaire. CEO thought it was a joke until she walked in. It was a cold winter evening. The cafe was glowing softly with golden lights, and Christmas songs played faintly in the background. At a corner table sat Ethan, the billionaire CEO everyone admired, but no one really knew. He looked perfect from the outside. Success, power, charm, but inside, his heart was empty. This blind date was supposed to be just another meaningless setup by his assistant. He even smiled bitterly, thinking how foolish it was. Love doesn't happen for people like me, he whispered to himself as he stared into his untouched cup of coffee. Just then the door opened, and a cold gust of wind brushed through the cafe. He lifted his eyes and froze. A young woman stood there, her eyes kind but tired, holding the hand of a little girl clutching a small teddy bear. The woman's coat was old, her hair slightly messy from the snow. Yet something about her presence filled the room with warmth. She looked around nervously. Then her eyes met Ethan's. For a moment, time seemed to stop. "Are you Mr. Ethan?" she asked softly. He nodded, too stunned to speak. The little girl stepped forward and said in the sweetest voice, "Mommy said you're a nice man." That one line pierced through Ethan's heart. He had faced thousands of boardrooms, made billion-dollar deals, but never had anyone's words made him feel so human. They sat together. The woman explained she wasn't here for a blind date. Her friend had played a prank and given her name instead. She was a single mother struggling to raise her daughter, and she apologized for the mistake. But Ethan couldn't stop listening to her story. The way she spoke about life, love, and hope despite hardship, it was something money could never buy. Hours passed without them noticing. For the first time in years, Ethan laughed. He watched the little girl feed her teddy imaginary tea and saw a glimpse of the family he never had. That night, something changed in him forever. What began as a joke turned into the most meaningful evening of his life. As the woman stood to leave, Ethan gently said, "Maybe destiny doesn't joke after all." She smiled, and in that smile, Ethan saw the beginning of something real, something pure, something his heart had been waiting for all along. Friends, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, where every story reminds you that love and goodness still exist in this world. That night after the blind date, Ethan couldn't sleep. The snow outside his penthouse windows fell endlessly, but all he could see was the face of that woman, Lila, and the little girl clutching her teddy bear. For years, Ethan had thought emotions were distractions, weaknesses that didn't belong in a billionaire's life. But now, every quiet moment echoed with her soft voice and her daughter's innocent smile. He found himself staring at the coffee cup she had used, which he had quietly brought back home without realizing it. There was still a faint lipstick mark on it, a reminder that for the first time, someone had sat across from him without caring who he was or how much money he had. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office earlier than usual. His assistant noticed the change. He wasn't his usual cold, distant self. Instead, he looked lost. The man who could command hundreds of employees with a single glance now sat silently, replaying every word Lila had said about her struggles, working 2 jobs, raising her child alone, and still believing that kindness could heal hearts. Hours turned into days, but he couldn't get her out of his mind. He searched through every contact, every record from the cafe, but there was no trace, no number, no last name, nothing. It was as if she had stepped into his life only to disappear like a snowflake melting on his palm. One evening, Ethan found himself back at the same cafe, the same table, the same soft music, the same smell of coffee and cinnamon. He sat there waiting, not for a meeting, not for a business call, but for a miracle. The waitress recognized him and smiled. "You're waiting for someone, aren't you?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded with a faint smile. "I don't know her name, but I'll know when I see her again." Suddenly the cafe door opened, and for a moment Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A woman walked in, holding a small child's hand. But it wasn't Lila. His hope fell, but he didn't leave. He waited every evening for a week, staring at that door. believing that maybe destiny wasn't done with him yet. Then one night, as snow fell heavier than before, he saw a familiar teddy bear drop near the cafe entrance. His eyes widened. He rushed out and saw the little girl bending to pick it up, and right behind her was Lila. She looked surprised, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You came back," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. "I didn't know if I should," she said softly. "People like you don't wait for people like me." Ethan stepped closer. "Maybe people like me were never alive, until people like you walked into their lives." In that moment, the cold air around them disappeared. The snow didn't matter. The city lights faded. All that existed was a lonely billionaire, and a woman who unknowingly gave him back the reason to believe in love, in hope, and in life again. Welcome back, friends, to the final part of our story. One final blind date, the lonely billionaire. CEO thought it was a joke until she walked in. Snow covered the city like a soft white blanket. A new year had begun, and with it came a quiet hope. It had been weeks since Ethan had seen Lila and her little girl again. But this time, it wasn't fate that brought them together. It was his heart that refused to let them go. Ethan had secretly been helping Lila, though she didn't know it. He paid off her late rent through an anonymous donation, sent gifts for her daughter, and made sure she got a better job in one of his small companies under a different name. But what he truly wanted wasn't gratitude, it was connection. He wanted to see her smile without worry, to hear that little girl laugh again. One cold evening, Ethan decided to visit her small apartment. He didn't send any driver or assistant. He went himself, walking through the quiet, snow-covered streets. When he knocked, the door opened slowly, and there stood Lila, holding her daughter, both surprised and speechless. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" she asked softly. He smiled gently. "I came to return something I think I stole from you that night." She frowned slightly. "What did you steal?" He looked down, eyes full of emotion. "Your peace." Lila's eyes filled with tears. She stepped aside and let him in. The apartment was small but warm, a little. Christmas trees still stood in the corner, and the little girl was drawing with her teddy bear beside her. She looked up, recognized Ethan, and ran to him. "You came back!" she squealed. Ethan knelt and hugged her tightly, his eyes wet. "I promised I would, didn't I?" As the evening went on, they sat together at the tiny dinner table. Lila poured him tea, and he watched her hands tremble slightly. He placed his hand over hers. "Lila," he said softly, "I've spent years chasing success, but I never knew what real happiness was until I met you two. I don't care about who I am out there anymore. What matters to me is being here." She tried to stop her tears, but they fell anyway. "Ethan, I'm just a single mom. I have nothing to offer you." He shook his head. "You have everything I never had, love, strength, honesty. You gave me something my billions never could, a reason to live." The little girl climbed into Ethan's lap and held his face in her small hands. "Are you going to stay with us now?" she asked innocently. Ethan smiled through his tears and said, "If your mom says yes." She took the ring with trembling hands, and in that tiny apartment, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and love, a lonely billionaire finally found his family. Outside, the snow fell silently, but inside, the world finally felt whole again. Friends, if this ending touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, because sometimes love doesn't come wrapped in luxury. It comes quietly on a cold winter night and stays forever.